And welcome to a special virtual TrekCon edition of Life Support Live, the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives, to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
As a famous starship captain once said, and as another famous starship captain also said, wherever we go on our mission, we'll try to have a little fun along the way.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. My name is psychologist Dr. Mattu.
And I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. One of us is a real doctor.
And we'll leave it to you to figure out who that might be. Hello, Virtual TrekCon. It is so good to have you here. Larry, we got a lot of our community here. We have a lot of new folks. Let's just get people oriented. What the heck is Life Support Live?
Well, our tagline and our mission statement is to boldly go through uncertain times. We bring a little mental health to Star Trek. We bring a lot of Star Trek to mental health. We always geek out, and we still manage to hopefully brighten people's day a little bit, but also give you some takeaways to take back into daily life that is so challenging right now.
Yeah, we do this show every morning, Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on Facebook over at Dr. Trek's page at Trekland. We also stream on Twitch, Life Support Live, and on YouTube at Larry's YouTube channel under Larry Nemecek. If you'd like to watch any of these weekly episodes, you can go to our Facebook group page. I put a link right up here to it, so feel free to join in. We do this show every week. However, this is a special Virtual TrekCon edition. What we're doing today, Larry, it's sort of a best of Life Support Live, like what
it's a greatest
we've learned.
Hits.
Yeah, it's the greatest hits. We've been doing this for, Larry, half a year now. We've been doing this for half a year.
Plus 1 week now. Right.
The idea was to do this for the duration. You and I were actually going to do a panel at WonderCon. Right. WonderCon was canceled. We turned that panel to a show. Now we've turned the show back into a panel.
It's come full circle.
It's come full circle. So today's a best of, and one of the ways in which we pick this best of are the best hits, the best misses, and the best lessons Larry and I have learned from doing this show from our first 6 months of doing it. And we try to focus it really on, Life Support Live is always about how does this stuff help us to go, to boldly go now in our current life, this weird world we live in.
Oh, that would be a great one too, but I like boldly go.
Yeah. Today's going to be some of the biggest lessons we've learned that could be helpful for all of us in 2020. So feel free to comment below. Yes. We're going to be taking questions. We're going to go right to the end of our limit of the time we're allowed it. Good thing is we don't have to get booted out of a room at a normal Trek con. Someone said here, it's nice not to have to rush room to room. My chair's getting a big workout. I feel the same way. So we're going to go right till the end. 9:45 is when we're supposed to end, 9:45 Pacific Standard. And then we'll cut the main content there, but we're going to stick around for another 10 minutes for a Q&A too. And in the meantime, we're happy to see the amazing chat that we have going on.
Oh my gosh, yes. I see a lot of our familiar faces from Life Support Live and some from Trekland, my world especially, and some of yours I know. But let's jump in. We only have an hour today, guys.
We only have an hour.
I want to remind our usual crowd who's with us on Saturdays that we're only in an hour, so we're not going to be dipping into the chat as much. But we are setting aside some hailing frequencies at the end, just to know.
So to get things started, we want to ask you a question, which is, what's your favorite example of mental health from Star Trek? What's your favorite example of a character going through something, or an example of professional mental health. What's your biggest lesson that you've taken that's helped you with your mental health? Let us know in the comments. So Larry, we're going to do a top 3. We're doing our top 3. We're going to do some top 3 hits. So starting
Special
with
graphics.
we got some special. It's a virtual TrekCon. We got special things going on here today. So for our top 3, our number 3 actually comes from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and this is the idea of living through uncertainty. Larry, there was a lot of uncertainty involved with Deep Space Nine, behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. Tell us a little bit about the uncertainty in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Well, I think Star Trek Deep Space Nine, aside from the fact that they blew their budget on their pilot and the rest of the first season was very self-contained, and people said, look, it's the little ship, it's the show that doesn't go anywhere. Now they're really not going anywhere. They're not on a ship, which was alleviated the next year in budget. But that wasn't part of the... Deep Space Nine was really trying to be the Casablanca in space, the Fort Apache in space on the frontier. And we all lovingly think now of DS9, especially now, not then, as the the Dominion War show and all that, but it had its rough patch, getting its own identity, as it were. Like a lot of us struggle to come up with an identity. But no, thankfully most of the time to think of mental health on DS9, it was more, well, there are always stories, but I think about it as more as what was baked in the cake is the DNA of the actual show format, because they wanted to get away from the perfect. I mean, the tagline for DS9 was always, it's the darker, grittier show. To which now Discovery would say, hold my beer. But back in the 90s...
hold my Rectigita.
Hold my Canar. Yeah. But I think everybody watching us today has a pretty good handle on what DS9 overall was about, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's... if we look at the story, some of the big story themes, there's so much that relates to uncertainty, rapidly changing events, not knowing what's going to happen in the future. Uncertainty is what drives anxiety, and there was a lot of it in the stories. We had the transition that Bajor was going through from the occupation to the interim Bajoran government, which seemed to be interim forever. It was a very long-term interim government. The discovery of the wormhole and the connection to the Gamma Quadrant. The whispers of the Dominion early on in the series, and then how that played out with the Dominion War.
Cut to the chase. The uncertainty, the biggest uncertainty of DS9 is all about what the hell's going on with the war, which is what the one that it's always to me personified by the image that I pulled up for us of of looking at. It's just one moment. I keep thinking that this moment was repeated like all through the series, but it's really just the one. Just checking out the war dead every week.
This is from In the Pale Moonlight, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so we see with the Dominion War a rapidly changing situation, a new enemy, a lot of uncertainty about who are these people, why do they want to attack us, how are they attacking us. It ties into the Klingon storyline with the war with the Klingons that erupts. And there's so many parallels here to 2020 with the discovery of the coronavirus. Well, we discovered it in last year, but how it was playing out, the way it was playing out in different populations. There was a lot we didn't know about the virus, and yet we had to navigate all of this. Not only big scale as societies, but individually in our own lives. What's going to happen with our work? Am I going to lose a job? How am I going to navigate going to the grocery store? How am I going to navigate these different situations?
My kids in school, my job, my paycheck, my store, my business, my everything, my family, my family across the country, my family around the world.
Yep. And a lot of the big things that help us with uncertainty we saw play out in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The visual that you had about looking at the casualty list, Sisko has to step back from that and sort of stop doing that because it does take him away a little bit from his mission of trying to bring the Romulans into the war, right? He's so overwhelmed. He's so paralyzed by all that information. And while he reads every name, he can't get stuck in that. And similarly, we've all had to learn how to manage our news and how to reduce some of our information seeking that way. We've all also had to find ways to detach from our stressors, do things that help us
less cable.
Yeah, we've all had to find our own Vicks and find something that helps us to forget a little bit about the stressors of the day. We've all had to find new hobbies that keep us engaged and keep our mind active, like the way Odo likes to torment Quark and the way Quark tries to get one over Odo. It's kind of like their running thing that they do. We all have had to find our own running thing that we do. And then the last thing here, Larry, that I think is a big lesson from Star Trek Deep Space Nine when it comes to
I wish
uncertainty.
Dax one day had just stood there and watched the two of them go at it and said, "Oh, that I love their little Spock McCoy thing they have going." That would have too bad for 1998, but whatever. Yeah,
she could have been the character that does that because she was around back then. Well, the last thing is letting your values guide your decisions. When you're facing uncertainty, not knowing what to do, what are the big things that you care about? And when it comes to Bashir trying to figure out how to take on Section 31, or it's Benjamin Sisko trying to figure out how to bring in the Romulans, they're looking at what are my values, what are the things I really care about when everything in the galaxy is changing. What are the true ideals that I hold as a Starfleet officer? Larry, I think we could go on and on about Deep Space
we could,
Nine.
and we often do on Saturdays, but we only have an hour, so we have to.
We often do. Let's go to our number 2 here. Number 2 is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And we're talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, but this plays out well into the next couple of movies. So let's talk about the needs of the many, Larry.
As you think about it, you might even ponder that it even plays out through, I don't know, it's a very Star Trek thing, and in time that even gets flipped on its side. Well, it was always an unstated part of the original series. I mean, look at Kirk diverting to Vulcan to get Spock there when they're in a medical biological situation. Well, Spock knows, but he's not talking. And for some reason, after 100 years of Federation and 200 years of First Contact, it's not in the Federation medical database. Oh, I love that one. Anyway, those Vulcans, those crazy Vulcans. But the bottom line is Spock is going to sacrifice his ship, his career, his one for the good of Spock, the one or the many for the good of one. So that was a statement that was around, Star Trek for a long time. But no, Wrath of Khan. A lot of people go, wait, you mean that was invented for Wrath of Khan? I mean, people not of the day. But yeah, that was a meme. That was a not I say trope. That's a looking down on it. But that was a concept that was like codified in Wrath of Khan. But it's all through all Star Trek. And of course, the movie trilogy, it's flipped on its side, and now we're going back to the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. But sacrifice, the kind of heroic sacrifice that we see all good Starfleeters do, and occasionally, the notable guest star, a recurring character, for Cardassia. Throws it in there too. Yeah.
Now you got to bring it back to Deep Space Nine. I'm going to refuse your bait to be drawn back into Deep Space Nine. But I completely agree with you, Larry.
Admiral Cornwell at the end of Discovery 2.
Wonderful example. Okay. And one of my favorite characters that I wish we had. I really hope we see a lot more of her on Strange New Worlds. The thing about the needs of the many is, this is a wonderful theme that cuts across all of Star Trek. It is about what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose, and this idea of sacred values. That for all of us, no matter where we live, there are things that we find are sacred. And I'm not talking about sacred in terms of religious. I'm talking about sacred in a secular, in a way that we all can understand. So in the United States, freedom of speech is a sacred value. In other parts of the world, there's different types of sacred values. I grew up in a family where we take off our shoes before coming inside. That's a sacred value. There are sacred values in Star Trek. Jean-Luc Picard says it very well in The First Duty. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth. And in Wrath of Khan, what we see the sacred value is the crew, the mission, that if need be, you will give up your life for the people that you serve, the crew that you serve, your friends, your family. And this is what leads Spock to sacrifice himself. This is also what leads Kirk to sacrifice his career and the ship in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. When we believe something is sacred, we go above and beyond. We put our own lives in danger. We are willing to give up everything for that thing that we value so much, for that thing that gives our life meaning and purpose. And what we see in Wrath of Khan is Kirk going from a state of feeling disconnected with his duty and purpose to the end, really discovering it's to Spock, it's to the crew, it's to the people that he loves.
Right. I was going to say on the side, you could even say the whole arc of Voyager is the sacred value of Voyager is we're going to be Starfleet, damn it, even if we're among even if no one's watching, we're going to be Starfleet, even among strangers that we don't know, and sacrifice the needs of the many for the one, or vice versa.
Absolutely.
The needs of the one for the many. Our little ship for our ideals, or whatever, our individuals.
Well, and why are we talking about this with 2020? There's a very strong parallel here, and this is one of the things, Larry, you and I talk about on Life Support Live that has been really missed, is when it comes to the safety precautions related to the coronavirus. We need a needs of the many outweigh a needs of the few situation, or the one. When it comes to social distancing, when it comes to the sacrifices we've all made related to the economy, when it comes to wearing a mask, these are difficult things to do, and they need to be mapped on to our sacred values of community, of taking care of one another, of support, of we're not going to buy all the toilet paper in the whole store because we need to share it because everyone needs it. If we had more of a consistent rollout, and I'm speaking for the United
no
States.
No pun intended.
Right. If we had more of a consistent campaign here, which we didn't have in the United States, their local, state, federal, everything was fragmented. We could have seen a rollout of coronavirus measures that mapped onto our sacred values. And if that happened, it would have been a lot easier for people to make some of these sacrifices. But that didn't happen, at least not in the United States.
Looking pretty Starfleet Command Klingon Human War there. A little disjointed, a little all over the place, a little up and down with the values until the former traitor comes in and reminds you what you're supposed to be doing. But anyway.
Great callback to Star Trek Discovery again, Larry.
Right.
That's our number 2. We could, again, spend forever talking about Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock and the voyage home, but we are not going to do that. We're going to go on to our number 1 pick. Number 1 pick.
Wow.
That was a drum roll.
That's better than the last drum roll you tried a few weeks ago, but okay.
No, I know. I tried to do
that
things
was a shoulder roll, which gives a whole definition. But let's move on.
Let's move on. A number 1 pick for the best hit of mental health, the best example of mental health in Star Trek is
as a storytelling vehicle. Yes.
Jean-Luc Picard.
Which was the topic of our very first Life Support Live, which was going to be the topic of our con. We've come full circle with this topic.
We've come full circle, Larry. Yeah. Everything that's happened before will happen again, to reference another science fiction franchise.
Picard's journey, and people had some criticism of the Picard series that just came back. But one thing it did do was just totally build up on this circle of life that poor Jean-Luc, he thought he was having it bad, having to run away from home because his daddy and his brother were mean to him. No, I'm just kidding, guys. He had much more trauma to go from, having a heart transplant as a young man to the trauma we just showed, the famous trauma, of course, of the Locutus and his Borgification there, his assimilation, even if it for a brief time. But the guy's life just, kept on and on and on and on. He's tortured by Cardassians. He's then he's back with the Borg again and has a PTSD moment with them, facing down his demons. Then later on, after retirement, he's having PTSD too. But he loses his family along the way too, which is is a thing that happens to people. But imagine what it's like to lose family members in 2370 to a barn fire.
Yeah.
It's like
and to be so far away from being able to do anything about it. And the reason why, there's wonderful examples of traumatic experiences and characters going through that in all of Star Trek. And we could look at Deep Space Nine, and almost every character there has an example. Whether you want to talk about the Visitor, or it's only a paper moon, or the Emissary, and where the show starts. About Benjamin Sisko losing his wife, also to the Borg. There are wonderful examples of trauma all throughout Star Trek. The thing about Picard, and I'm saying,
I'm sorry, I was forced to live another person's life on a dying planet for 30 years.
Yes,
in this painful moment.
Yes.
And then then O'Brien gets to say, well, here, hold my Ractigino. I'm going to do the same thing, but it'll be in prison in hard labor. Your family, your planet's dying.
O'Brien must suffer.
Yeah.
Well, what I think, why Jean-Luc Picard is number one, is we have decades of examples and decades of growth and struggle with this character. Whether you want to go decades in terms of canon, and we go back to Tapestry, one of our favorite episodes that we talk about often, and
what was that episode?
Tapestry.
Okay.
We have a little drinking game here.
Just in case our regulars are on the drinking game. Yes, that's what.
Yeah, we have a Ractigino drinking game Saturday mornings, and every time we reference Tapestry or sing a song, is
Bad
two of
impressions.
the bad impressions. Yes.
I mentioned McCoy, or you mentioned.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther. There we go, folks. You got two right there. Anyways. If you go canon,
this time of day, hopefully.
If you go in terms of canon timeline, we can go all the way back to Tapestry, Jean-Luc Picard getting stabbed in the heart by a Nas again. Dom Jot, human play, Dom Jot. Stabbed in the back.
Okay.
Anyways, now you get a little taste of what our Saturday mornings are like. You see Picard go through an example of post-traumatic growth, which means through the struggle and fallout of a trauma, sometimes our values change. Sometimes our goal and our direction of our life can change. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what happened with Jean-Luc Picard. He learned how to take life a bit more seriously, to take more risk, to become less cautious and really focus on who he wants to be, because he doesn't know how much time he has. To then, as you were saying, Larry, Locutus, the torture by the Cardassians, losing his family, getting re-traumatized in Star Trek First Contact, facing the Borg again. And then what we see in Star Trek Picard...
Yes, the third time.
The Romulan refugees failing the Romulans. Blaming himself for Data's death. And why I think Picard is struggling more in Star Trek
Picard. And retreating from life.
And retreating from life. That's the thing about it. The reason why I think Picard has gone through everything in the past and stayed relatively resilient is he's had the support of his crew. He's had Deanna by his side. He's had his mission. He's had the kind of things that help us. Support from friends, a really meaningful life, professional counseling. And in Star Trek Picard, he has distanced himself. He is largely alone besides his two Romulan friends. And he doesn't have the professional support
of
Dan. And his dog. He does have his dog, which is very important to mental health for a lot of people. And Larry, he's also suffering from a neurodegenerative disease that does make him more prone to emotions. So he's struggling more at a time when he has less connection.
Right. Just go away, old man. Get off the stage.
Yeah. Picard shows us post-traumatic growth. He shows us resilience. And he also shows us what happens when we might be struggling more and don't have the support we need. I don't think there's any other character in Star Trek that has a longer, more complicated, well-developed example of what mental health means.
And you're going to die on that hill, huh? Okay.
I will. This hill right here with this stool that I'm sitting on. This is the one. I will.
I can think of some runners-up. Kirk himself, Spock, obviously, Worf even. But just because Worf has been in, Michael Dorn's been in 2 series and has the most appearances of it. I mean, that's going to have to be regurgitated now. That's going to be recalibrated. But for a long time, it was very easy to say 7 years and 7 years, 14 times 26 or whatever it was. Michael Dorn and Worf had the most appearances, plus the 4 movies. So anyway, but that's here and there. But yeah, there are some other. But with the addition of the Picard series, you have to say, I mean, we saw him, but the Picard arc was interesting because when they get to season 2, it's a new ball game, and that's great. But the first season was all about seeing this man in his little bitty pieces, then seeing this man with all his broken pieces, and then by midway, they're starting to click back into place. And then you even see him get back on top of his game by the end. And I don't know how you sustain that for a new go-round. You know, the sequel is always But at least for that season, it was amazing to see, you know, we started off with the pieces, but they were pieces. And to see the pieces get back into place once again, you know, was interesting.
And Nathaniel has a great comment here about the episode Sarek, when Picard deals with the problems of revealing everything that he's learned from the mind meld and all of that. One more thing I want to say about Picard. Picard very much helped me in not only with Tapestry and the idea that if we learn from our setbacks, we can grow. That was a very important life lesson for me. But Larry, another one, I think this is a virtual TrekCon exclusive. In season 1, we learned that Picard is a very bad speller, that he doesn't spell very well. And he does a lot of text-to-speech. He speaks to the computer. So it gave me a lot of... it made me feel great about myself that I struggle with spelling very much so. And it makes sense that someone who grew up with largely voice commands might not have done a lot of this kind of stuff. So even this guy who loves to read and is a captain of Starship...
They call it writing.
Yeah, he's not the best speller and hasn't written much. So maybe that gave me a lot of hope for myself. All right, Larry, let's switch gears here, and we're going to talk about our top 3 misses. So these are examples that are not so great or they're a bit problematic, and we want to hear from our lovely audience over here. We've got an amazing comment section going. What's a worst example of mental health in Star Trek? Let us know in the comments below. Larry, number 3.
We're starting with number 3, but I know what your number 1 is.
So you know what my number 1 is.
Yeah, I know what your number 1 is. So we were bouncing around number 3, and there's lots of... Sometimes we can even distinguish here between what was an intentional bad counseling move that was part of a plot point and what was just, maybe those writers should have paid more attention to a consultant or, maybe what their own therapist said when they were in therapy. Because I know at least a couple of the Star Trek writers who have been in therapy in a good way, as a healthy thing. I don't mean like recovering from trauma, but just, ongoing life. Late, great Michael Piller would always laugh about ideas he would steal from his therapist to put into episodes. But he always with the baseball cap because he was so upset about his thinning hair and his Rogaine. But then Rogaine gave us Insurrection. So there's a little mini K3 for you. I didn't know if you knew.
Doherty out.
It's Insurrection to this man, and that's all he can say to you is Doherty.
That's all I can say. It just cracks me up.
So here's...
How many people does it take before it's wrong, Larry? How many?
The line was gone there and no further.
Yeah. And I crossed it. I jumped right over it.
That's the last line. No, here's the thing. An entire series of Voyager.
Yeah.
I don't know if they had a counselor who died when they got thrown into the Delta Quadrant. But, aside from, Vulcan meditation, and you thought McCoy wasn't the best bedside manner at times. Oh, my God. Their poor EMH. But they really were one ship being cut off. All the hassles, the struggles, the traumas, the separation, the isolation. We've talked about them in different ways and how they apply to 2020. But they did all of that without no visible means of support. Times it was really a blow.
We had Tuvok in his meditation, as you mentioned.
His Vulcan candle. Yeah, his Vulcan
candle. Yeah. We got a lot of that. And, mindfulness meditation is a big thing right now. A lot of folks have used Headspace or the app Calm. It's really hot stuff right now, but it doesn't work for everyone. And so the idea that everyone's going to benefit from Vulcan mysticism, I think is not a great message. And then we also had Neelix, who was the morale officer. Tom, who created this holodeck.
I'm sorry, we're trying to find the helpful parts of Voyager.
Exactly. exactly. Well, yeah, Voyager gives us such great stories, and the image we put up is an image where our Captain Janeway, is really going through a very tough time. It seems like she's going through a period of depression, a very long period of,
as it were.
yeah, and Voyager also shows us how to deal with isolation and separation. So it shows us a lot of mental health themes, and of course, there's the great arc with Seven of Nine and her identity and reintegration into humanity. Voyager gives us B'Elanna. B'Elanna has some wonderful stories about dealing with intense emotions. But Larry, where is the professional help?
She's a textbook mental health case.
She's dealing with so much.
Yeah, PTSD. Yeah, depression when the Maquis are wiped out.
She's dealing with a lot of identity, being bicultural, being bispecies. There's so much that they're dealing with, but we don't see any of them really get professional help or support. The doctor does so much to improve upon his programming, and the doctor even gets a wonderful mental health episode. Larry, I'm blanking on the name. The episode where he has his own programmable family.
Right, his family. Right. Yeah.
And you see the doctor learn so much about life and loss and grief. He goes through so much growth. But why doesn't he get just install one software update about psychological first aid? Maybe just install that.
Within a generation, I think if it was by the time Rios is running around in La Serena, there probably is an emergency medical counselor, the EMC, which everybody calls the Einstein, or the second model, which would be the EMC squared, right? Ooh, I just thought of
it.
Okay. Anyway, apparently Voyager got away from home without its EMC, so they only had an wait, I'm messing that up, right? The emergency medical counselor. That's fine. I guess it would technically be the ECH, which messed my Einstein bit up, but that's okay. They didn't have a holographic counselor, is my point here. So they didn't think they needed one, or they thought, I don't know. It was a small show, right? It's only 70, 75 people originally. So.
Yeah, I like what Tiffany has to say here. These mistakes and misses are important to show that no matter how far the Federation has come, there is still a ways to go. Absolutely, Tiffany. I think that's a great way to segue to our number two, which someone incorrectly predicted that this was going to be my number one. My number two biggest miss, our number two biggest miss, is plexing. Oh, Larry.
And by this, we don't mean visiting a transparent aluminum plant in 1986 or whatever.
No.
The forerunner of a transparent aluminum plant. No, not PlexiCorp, just Plexi.
Right. We should make that distinction. Hello, computer. So plexing comes from a Star Trek Next Generation episode where Barclay, not Broccoli, but Barclay is experiencing anxiety, goes to get some professional help from Deanna Troi. And Deanna Troi basically says, have you tried plexing? It's this betazoid technique. You just kind of hit this spot and it calms you down. I hate plexing, Larry. I hate plexing. For a number of reasons. Number one, I think it's just bad therapy.
Excuse me. You do realize you're disrespecting the entire Betazoid Psychiatric Association.
Allow me to explain.
My
Betazoid colleagues.
You right now.
My Betazoid colleagues have developed this treatment that probably does work well for Betazoid physiology. In a similar way that if people are able to learn deep breathing, sometimes deep breathing, when you slow your breathing down, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which calms your body down. It's kind of a similar idea. But even then, some people have a hard time learning deep breathing. It doesn't work for everyone. But that's something that's very much tied to our physiology. Plexing is tied to Betazoid physiology. And the way it's also shown to Barclay... Yes, yeah. She doesn't really spend the time to train him in how to do it. And I think it promotes this very bad stereotype of therapy that it's just these quick little tricks maybe and it'll work. But even in the way she shows Barclay, it doesn't work.
It's not?
But then it's not. It's not. And the other problem I have with plexing is, my goodness, hasn't mental health come a lot farther by the time we get to the 24th century? We have hyposprays, we have dermal regenerators, we have all of this stuff that's really advanced Starfleet medicine, and yet we haven't really advanced psychotherapy. There should be new techniques, new instruments, new medications, and even by 1980 standards, we had very effective treatments for anxiety, and those aren't the type of treatments that are shown here. So plexing, I think, all over the place is just a really bad example of what mental health care is.
Your point there about Starfleet and its counselors and the state of... I think it's been well established by Next Gen's time that for at least the last 100 years, all the best counselors get promoted to the Admiralty. So they just lose... Their ranks are always subject to turnover.
This is true. This is
totally
true.
Kidding. Thank you, Admiral Cornwell, for adding so much texture, not trivia, to our understanding of psychiatry and psychology in the 2070s. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyways, we could spend more time talking about plexing, but let's get to our number one. My number one biggest miss.
This
when
is
it comes
actually
to mental health.
a point on the drinking game. When Ollie mentions this, it's time to go.
Ezri and Garrick in Star Trek Deep Space Nine in the season 7 episode. Yes, there's a few things that I think are very good here. One, we have seen a lot of... Garrick is one of the best characters in all of Deep Space Nine, which is saying a lot, because every character on that show is the best character on Deep Space Nine.
And I would say that Ezri is the best ever one-year regular.
I would agree with that, Larry. Although, I guess she wasn't a regular. The Romulan in charge of the cloaking device on Defiant, she was never a regular, was she? She was she was only in the Search Part 1 and 2, I think.
I'm talking open titles regular, come on.
Yes. I agree. Now, the thing with Garrick that I really like...
Kate Mulder, just for all you people out there griping about Pulaski being not being seen in the right light. Pulaski was never considered a regular. She was always a recurring guest star, even though she was in every episode. Go, Ollie. Back to the topic.
So what I like about Garrick is we see Garrick. We see him being ostracized and alone from his people. We see him losing his sense of meaning and purpose in terms of serving the Obsidian Order. We see him struggle with claustrophobia when he's held by the Dominion, and then all of that is kind of playing out in season 7 in that episode with Ezri. So I love the character development that Garrick has gone through. Now, my struggle here, and why I think it's the number one miss, is Ezri should really be able to do much better at this point. And the way her treatment is shown, I think, really supports a lot of stigma related to mental health. That therapists might not know what they're doing, that effective treatments don't exist. We have very effective treatments for claustrophobia. One of them is exposure therapy. And someone like Ezri should know this. She shouldn't be so overwhelmed with what to do. And she should be able to search the Federation database, the medical database, to know what treatment should I give Garrick, even if she has been promoted too early, even if she shouldn't, if this is like an emergency position she's granted. Larry, I think that was something that we learned from our discussion. That was feedback you gave me, that it is a time of war. That Cisco, as one of the most in command and one of the most important strategic outposts or positions, could probably ask for Dax to be with him, even if she's not ready. But even then, she should be able to know what's the effective treatment here and implement it. I have much more faith in Starfleet Medical for training its counselors than what we end up seeing with Ezri and Garrick. So I think at worst, Ezri and Garrick really supports a lot. It can perpetuate a lot of stigma related to mental health.
Did you mention the fact that she was an emergency unplanned joining, Trill?
No, I didn't. But please do, Larry. I think you've got some great thoughts here about that. Yeah,
no,
I don't.
Yeah, it's just the way it was. But then, you know, as somebody I'm married to always used to say, well, then where would the story be? I know. Shoot. Yes. Well, anyway, I'm glad we let you get that out of your system.
Yeah,
What are we?
yeah.
Yeah, I keep seeing. I want to thank everybody. We're not dipping into the chat as much as we normally do on Saturday because we're trying to keep moving along. I pulled 2 or 3 out of the chat though, so everybody keep it up. Keep enjoying yourselves too, whatever it is you're drinking this early in the morning. But let's we should move on because I do want to have
Yeah.
time to get to some of these chat comments, even
I do too.
the earlier ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our top 3 lessons learned. Now, Larry, this is where we're going to take things a little bit more personal and very much related to our community over here. So yeah, I know. What we mean by lessons learned is what have we learned through 27 episodes of Life Support Live? What have we learned through our community of these live shows? And we want to turn it over to the audience over here too. What are the biggest lessons you've learned about mental health in 2020? Let us know in the comments the biggest things you've learned about mental health in 2020. And our number 3 is when we share our pain, we write permission slips for others to do the same thing. When we share our pain, and we've got an image to kind of represent this right over here. This is one of my favorite scenes in all of Star Trek, which is Garrick and Quark talking about the Federation, lamenting some things about the Federation over root beer. It's one of the greatest quotes about the Federation. But Larry,
so cloying.
What we've learned is as you and I share more of the struggles we're going through in our own lives, it's made it easier for other people in the community to share their struggles. When you've shared more of yours, it makes it easier for mine. And then it goes around and around, and it makes us feel less alone, less strange. Mm-hmm. It helps us to understand why we might be feeling the things we are, and it helps us to then get help. I think it all starts with that, sharing one piece of the struggle you're going through with someone else who's there to listen.
Yeah. Remember when people made fun of Cybok and his whole share your pain therapy? Yeah. Now that was pre-2020, obviously. So.
Oh gosh, Cybok. Yeah. We haven't spoken about Cybok in a long time. People always forget about him, and apparently Spock's parents just hide all these siblings.
Spock's parents. Well, Sarek does. Sometimes I wonder if Sarek is telling Amanda everything. Oh,
yeah, I know.
Oh dear, did you bring home another kid? Oh,
oh my gosh. But yeah, that's been
don't give me the Vulcan priestess princess line this time. I know she's not Vulcan. Yeah. Anyway.
We get a great comment from Watcher 652 Vid. Zoom is a lifesaver. Talking is helpful, even when it's virtual. And Larry, I'm so thankful that we have had the technology to have our show, to have the community, to be able to go through these things. It would be very hard to go through 2020 without any of this technology.
I have said many times for all the ways, for school continuing, even in its limited state, businesses continuing, but most of all, just our social interaction, what we're able to do during lockdowns and pandemic, fears and scares and all that is our life right now. With the good thing, this pandemic didn't happen if it had to happen. Even 10 years ago, we had the beginnings of this technology, but it would have been like ham radio operators or something. It would have been so many people would have had to get over a hump. But if it had been 15 years ago or 20, forget it. We would really all literally be in our little houses. We'd all be phoning each other or cell phoning on tiny little pixel screens or something, and it would have been, more maddening. Might have been a technology bump. We might have got here, quicker. But yeah, thank goodness we can do this. So yes, I'm very appreciative. We share our pains, but yeah, our audience every week, the audience we've got today is really good about sharing and throwing ideas out, and keeps me fresh, as well as feeling better about things. And I know even aside from the whole Esri texture, I know it's been good for you too.
Well, yeah, it absolutely has. And even with Esri, Jamal over here is saying, I think the problem was a near complete lack of information about Cardassian psychology. And this is actually a really great segue to our number 2 lesson learned.
Number 2.
Number 2 of number 2. Have a drink, folks. There you go. Intellectual humility is our number 2. And one of the things, Larry, I've learned
What do
about
you
doing
mean
this
by
show.
that, Dr. Ali?
What I mean by that, it's a great question because it's a strange term that not everyone's used to.
You just make that up. It's not just some psycho-techno babble, is it?
No, it's a great term for 2020, which is not being so confident, so bold in your in what you think is fact, is true, and acknowledging that other people have life experiences that might be different than your own, and there might be information that you do not have that could add much more understanding and, to use one of your words, Larry, texture to our knowledge. And one of the things I've learned through doing this, Jamal just showed it, case in point right over here, is I have learned so much about Star Trek and dealing with some of my tough feelings about Star Trek that have come and gone. I had some tough feelings about Lower Decks, Star Trek Lower Decks here and there, but you and I having those discussions and approaching it with intellectual humility has really helped me to appreciate things from a very different perspective. One of the challenges I had with Lower Decks is, why do they keep mentioning the Enterprise? Like, we get it. Like, let's mention other aspects of this big franchise. And Larry, do you remember what you told me about that? When I
heard your words.
You talked about, well, if they are mentioning the Enterprise so much and the characters so much, it shows us the weight of the flagship in the Federation and how much the stories and tales and adventures of this crew, how they ripple out throughout Starfleet. And when I start to think about it,
I basically said the reason that we're watching Kirk and Company and Picard and Company, it's not just because they had a good agent. It's because they were the people that deserve a series.
Yes. Yes.
In a meta way, right?
Yes.
So Lower Decks reinforces the fact that we just didn't get, show number 47 of the entire Federation catalog. We got the cream of the crop for a reason. So of course that's who the people of their contemporaries are all aware. Everybody knew who Eisenhower, MacArthur, and Patton were. We all know who the big bands are. We know who everybody knew all the personal details about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and name your band now. Right. So the people,
and it's the same thing. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And learning from
whoever's sweating,
learning from each other, and approaching this stuff with humility. There's a lot of people I know who love Ezri, and I do love so many parts of the character, and there's so many people for whom that moment really resonates when Ezri. Right. I've spoken to therapists who have told me I have felt like Ezri at times, especially when I was new, and I felt like I was an imposter and people were going to find out how unprepared I am for this work. Physicians have mentioned that. Many healthcare professionals feel this way, feel this internal sense of imposter syndrome when they start. So approaching our conversations with humility, with intellectual humility, has been a great lesson for us and a great lesson for Star Trek. There's so many different versions of Star Trek, and let's all remember IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. It's okay to love different versions. It's okay to love certain versions less, and even in those versions, there's probably reasons we can find why people love them. Instead of bashing a version of Star Trek that you don't like, instead ask the person, what's it about this version of Star Trek that really strikes you? What is it about this Star Trek that really means so much to you? How does it resonate to you? Let's have those conversations, because there's so much we can learn from each other and share it with each other when we focus on why we love versions of Star Trek as opposed to why we hate them.
Dr. Ali, the Gate Destroyer.
Smash gatekeeping in Star Trek. Number one reason, or number one lesson learned. Crossing the streets, that I am.
You're gonna wear out that drum and that shoulder, but go ahead.
I know, it's already worn out. Number one reason. Number one.
I'm just doing top 40. Yes.
Number one, engage. We boldly go together. is our number one. Larry, let's talk about We Boldly Go Together. What do we mean by this?
Well, it was the song from that 1940s musical, Merrily We Go Together. Yeah. Um, no, we are all going together. We kind of touched on it here that I don't know. It's like it's almost a corollary of for the good of the many over the good of the one, the good of the many. Period. It's like if you can sit home in your cave, you can go back to your vineyard and sulk and or you can stick your head out and join with everybody else and find your tribe, find your likes, dislikes, share your pain. But yeah, it's amazing how. Well, let me get back to this. We started by saying our show 27 weeks ago. We started today's hour by using an old phrase that occurred to me. I'm a big history buff as much as a space buff and a sci-fi buff, and I love the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. Excuse me, the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s, and that phrase that came out during wartime after Pearl Harbor, and everything's the rationing came down. We're losing all the men in our communities and a lot of the women too. But it's like they're either too young or too old. That song that makes fun of the girl that has nobody to date. Everybody's either a kid or an old man, kind of a thing. But anyway, all the changes, all the upheaval in our daily lives, right? The inability of we're all supposed to be sacrificing, go do the scrap metal drive, everything like that, and then to get the pain, to be a gold star family and have the pain of a lost one and the uncertainty, all of that. How long do we have to put up with this? How long will this take? Well, it's a war. Everybody knew that. And it was a big war. It wasn't a little dinky, 1/1,000,000th of our people are going and doing the fighting and the sacrificing. It was all generations, all classes type of war. And the best they could come up with, the phrase was, well, for the duration. Or that would be the top of the memo, right, of the order. Yeah. For the duration, blah, 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 blah. And when the pandemic came down, the lockdown came down, I have some Tuesdays lives where as it was getting closer and closer in the weeks before, and as it was a Seattle thing and a Bay Area thing, and it's like, guys, we're not going to have conventions this year. Is Zoom going to take, I was literally trying to say this in March, right? We're going to have a whole, and the best you could say was that phrase kept coming up to me. It's like, no one knows. No one knows how bad it will get. No one knows how long it will last. But these things that are going to happen and are happening, it's for the duration. And that's a phrase that, it's amazing how history's come full circle. But I really don't think even with the traumas we've had, the JFK, if you think of a social national trauma like 9/11 or JFK's assassination or 1968, which used to have the year crowned as worst year ever. We don't know how, those were like momentary shocks and then we began to recover from them. This is like ongoing and we don't know. And it's like the first time I think since Pearl Harbor and the immediate, the first months after that, it's the first time the stock market crash and the depression was kind of that way. We had two huge traumas in a row. And then we've been pretty, aside from our bad days, we've been pretty, ongoingly trauma-free as a country, as a society, as a world. And 2020 ended that. So yeah, for the duration comes in really handy as a phrase.
Yeah, we're going through this together. And
style rant there when I shouldn't have. So sorry, guys.
No, it's okay. The idea for the duration, and we've been doing this show for the duration. We have no idea how long it's going to go. In the comments section, a lot of folks are talking about the pros and cons of these virtual Trek cons and how it's opened the door for so many not only to be able to attend and interact when they wouldn't otherwise, but then also to be able to participate when it might be harder to participate in a big room.
And a lot of people's first time ever. A lot of people never got to go to a con at all.
Yeah, and we don't know how long we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing it for the duration, whatever that means, whatever that ends up meaning. But we're all struggling. You can't see each other's struggles. So often they're invisible. And we're going through this together. We're going to support each other together, and it's through these types of communities that we're going to get through this together. So, folks, if you want to join our community, if you want more Life Support Live, please visit our Facebook page, and you can get all the updates. We stream this every Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. If you go to facebook.com/group/Life Support Live, that'll get you connected to our Facebook, our YouTube, and we also have a podcast. Right now, the podcasts
news.
are all the are live streams on delay. Right now, if you look up Life Support Live on your favorite podcatcher, you'll be able to see the feed. Subscribe. We're going to be releasing the first 10 episodes from our podcast this week. We'll keep moving forward until we're caught up to 27. So, folks, I know we're at.
Yeah.
Yes,
oh, and by the way, our live show Saturdays, that's only 6 p.m. British summertime, 7 p.m. Central Europe. And I have a lot in my Trekland and Portales families that come in with us Saturdays. So you guys across the continent, if you're watching too, over the pond, it's easy to get to live also. That's why we do it early in the morning, so we can get as many people in around the world as we can. So 6 and 7.
So folks, we're going to stick around for 10 more minutes. And we know that we're coming up at 45, and you might have another panel that you want to go to. So if you want to go to that other panel, feel free to. Thank you for being here. As we usually say, live long and prosper, and always...
Yep. Trek well, guys.
However, if you'd like to stay for a little Q&A, Larry and I are here. We're going to stay for 10 more minutes and be able to have a little Q&A with you folks. Open up our hailing frequencies, as we like to say on Life Support Live.
Yep. Yep. And listen, as opposed to what I normally do on Saturdays, I actually had the brilliant idea for once to copy and paste some comments from the earlier part of the chat out to save later. What a concept. It only took me 25 weeks to figure that out.
While Larry pulls up his comments, folks, if you have any questions for us about Star Trek and mental health, let us know in the comments. We're going to pull out some of the best questions. Larry, you got some ready to go.
I do. But by the way, one thing we should have mentioned before we said goodbye to some folks is we did the show place, but I've got LarryNemecek.com, and I'm at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, and you are?
At Mattu on social media, and my YouTube channel is called The Psych Show, where I make psychology fun and easy to understand. He
does. He has totally non-Star Trek psych issues. My other handle is Larry Nemecek's Trekland on Facebook and on Instagram. But here's a couple I pulled up here, and good point. Jamal Taylor at one point said, we're talking about all these characters. Scotty probably deserves an honorable mention. He's been killed once or twice, a lot of physical trauma. He's had bits of depression. I think he had a midlife crisis there with Mira Remain, maybe even. But yeah, Scotty's... It's almost like any leading crew of any of the hero starships that we see has probably been around the block just because the writers are mean, but and want drama. But yeah, I would say that too. Here's another one. Charlotte.
I want to say real quick about Scotty. I think Scotty also shows us there's a lot we can talk about substance use with Scotty. And when is substance use a problem? When is it not a problem? We saw a lot more substance use in Star Trek Picard, but we've also seen it with Scotty, and so maybe that's an issue we should take on, Larry, because we haven't really done a deep dive into substance use, what it is, when it helps, when it's a problem. So maybe we should talk about that next time, or sometime in the future.
Right. That's good. So I want to say, I see a lot of new names today, and again, I want to say a lot of our community is here, but I'm seeing a lot of new faces and new names, so that's awesome. One of them, I think, is Charlotte Brockman. Early on, said, I often wonder about Molly's mental health, Molly O'Brien. What with both of her parents had been possessed by aliens at some point, living on DS9 during a war, plus the aftermath of her dad's traumas. Did he come out a hard time coming in and abuse his family? We didn't see that about him.
Well, and kind of seeing
didn't happen. There was a little
running into your older self who lived on a planet alone for decades, and then having to say goodbye to that older self. Yeah, we should talk about Molly and development.
Forget Miles. Forget O'Brien must suffer. How about Molly did suffer?
Yeah, I think all of the O'Briens really do suffer.
And her mom off on. Well, I guess she was with her mom when her mom would. Yeah.
A quick comment to Galinda. I need to know how to find a tricky psychotherapist. There's a lot of them out there, and sometimes just when you're working with someone, drop a little Star Trek reference and see if they pick up on it. You'd be surprised how many of us there are in Starfleet Medical.
That's part 2. I had to pull out from Galinda too. She said when she finds a new therapist, she always starts to ask them if they're a Trekkie. She says, it's critical.
There you go. There you go. Galinda, a little mind meld there for all of us.
Here's what Sue, at one point, Sue Gruner, hello Sue, another new name, said, nobody has panic attacks in Starfleet. Is that a deal breaker? Well, I think if they're going to be the featured guest star, or if it's a season finale or the cliffhanger of a 2-parter, they get a panic attack, maybe. I'm just thinking. You can't,
I think
if that's true, it must have been waived for. It's like the lower decks crew gets to suppress that. They don't put that in the official report.
One of the things, panic attacks. You don't necessarily know someone's experiencing a panic attack. Sometimes it's very obvious. Oftentimes it's not. So I would argue we probably have many characters who may have experienced panic attacks. Most people in 1 year will experience somewhere in the range of 2 to 5 panic attacks. They just won't experience it as panic because they're realizing, I'm really anxious right now. People who struggle with panic attacks have more intense reaction, and also it's very
or anxiety attack. However, if they're not currently diagnosed with anxiety, right?
Right. So I think we probably have seen a lot of characters, but have no idea that that's what they're experiencing.
Who comes to mind first? You know who popped into my mind first?
Barkley, obviously.
Okay, but we didn't see it, but it's Kirk when he froze and didn't shoot.
Oh yes.
Even though it had nothing, but it traumatized him, right? It was a little thing he did. Anyway,
which I'll say, the freeze response. People often talk about fight or flight. The freeze response is one of the most common responses to anxiety. Is when something scary's happened, we freeze. A lot of animals do that when they might be chased by a predator, and oftentimes freezing maybe it makes. Right, yeah. Well, that's the problem, is deers haven't quite evolved to understand how cars work. But a lot of times freezing might make a predator think you're dead, or it might reduce the chances of them seeing you. And for humans, a lot of times freezing keeps danger from escalating, keeps problems from escalating. So freezing is a perfectly adaptive response, and you're right, Larry. We see Kirk engage in that.
Yeah, and I see another one here from our chat earlier. D. Magello. I'm sorry about the name. He said, "I've never heard of Life Support Live before. I'll have to check this out. This has been really insightful." Yay! That's all we're trying to do. We still have when we first started. We would talk about it's Star Trek and mental health, and I would say there's no quiz, there's no test the next day.
This is all fun. This is all fun. Robert has a great question. Ali, do you know of any case of good actual counseling in Star Trek? Star Trek Picard, Nepenthe is probably the most phenomenal example of counseling skills in action. We see a very experienced counselor, Troy, with a long-time patient of hers. In much the same way that we have patients in the military, the lines are blurred between who's a colleague, who's a friend, and who's your patient when you're serving in the military. In much the same way, she provides Picard with the counseling he needs to overcome the struggles he's in, and does the same thing with Dodge as well.
She tries to do, or Soji, actually.
With Soji in a slightly different way, but especially with Picard, Robert, I think that's one of the best examples. We also see it in Discovery with Admiral Cornwell offers the doctor some wonderful advice, even though she's no longer practicing. She's still able to offer him some wonderful
even though it was a plot point. Oh yeah, it was some of the best. Well, we had a retiree and a promoted way beyond that pay grade occasions there, but it's like the best. I don't know. I guess it's because we've all gotten more sophisticated with mental health and counseling, and it's for as far as it has to go. about just being out in the open and we openly talk about it, it's much further along than it was in the 60s or even in the 80s and 90s. And I don't know, maybe we're seeing that reflect. We talk about the tech advancing, everyday tech and how it's dated. The mental health, I just saw somebody was laughing about this. I keep wanting to do this on the main show. Somebody noticed, it was Clayton George. Hi, Clayton. Said Trek's treatment of mental health has been brought up as a joke, referring to like whom gods destroy. Give him this medicine and he'll be totally cured. And the neural neutralizer, which I used to talk about all the time, I would just go woo, 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 woo for a neural neutralizer moment. But yes, it's like everybody in our later iterations is displaying. Although, Troy had a couple of moments there. Troy with Barkley in Voyager was awesome.
Voyager. Yeah, we've actually talked about that in Life Support Live, that Troy is wonderful with Barkley and Voyager, and the writing got better for her as a counselor. Marina has always been wonderful and amazing, but the writing finally caught up.
That's what you say when you have a patient from 10 years ago show up to you, and you say, wow, I wish you'd told me that 10 years ago. And you say, well, the writing got better.
The writing got better. Tim's got a great question here. As a Trekian psychologist, what is Dr. Ali personally taking from the issues of mental health brought up in Star Trek? One of the things that I take from it is Starfleet officers represent really the best. These are the people who have very high ideals, high morals, high ethics, and high expertise. And they can struggle with these different issues and learn how to be resilient, still report for duty, still be able to contribute in ways even though they might be struggling. I think that's a great lesson we can all take, is we can both be amazing at what we do and also struggle. Those two things can both occur at the same time. This is why I got a little upset in Star Trek Discovery, where I'm blanking on his name. Our Klingon turned Starfleet officer,
Ash Tyler and Vogue. Yeah,
Ash Tyler was taken out of duty because of the trauma he experienced, and I didn't really think we had a good representation of what that process would look like. So I think that's one recent exception, but overall, Starfleet does not discriminate based on mental health, and I think that's a wonderful takeaway that we can all aspire to.
Yeah. Gosh, I had a great point here. Oh, you were talking about now Lower Decks has reminded us, and again, we should have pointed out, a lot of the world has not seen Lower Decks, and a lot of folks haven't seen Picard and Discovery, so bearing that in mind. But Lower Decks has shown us, not every ship is the flagship, not every ship is the Enterprise, or even the Voyager Defiant. But if we're talking about Starfleet being the best of the best, even within Starfleet, there's a spectrum. But even more than that, it's like you would think on one hand, yeah, you had Troy on the flagship, and they had the role of counselor, and maybe this was reflecting our times as we go through Archer and then Kirk's time and all that. But and when counselors became a fixed item in Starfleet manifests. But if you were in a fallacy, if you stop and think, if Starfleet is pre-selecting for the best, that would include mentally healthier. And you'd say, well, there's not as much call for a full psychiatric staff as there is, say, for a medical staff that's going to deal with injuries and whatever. The unknowns and occasional combat and all that. But at the same time, it almost feels like, and maybe you correct me on this, the people who are the most mentally healthy, let's say, when they do have a trauma that's debilitating, they're going to fall as far, or I say fall here roughly as a layman, they're going to fall just as far or further because they're not used to having a bumpy life. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The need for those people is just as acute or even more so. I'm not trying to rank people's pain here, but when they do fall, when they do need the help, they'll really need the help because they're not used to being in that situation. And you got the worst patient in the world syndrome and all of that happening then, right? Maybe.
Larry, I have to play what has been affectionately called our sad music. It's the same music from the beginning, but at the beginning it's a happy music. In the end, it's called the sad music.
Our friend Libby started calling it the sad music at the end. She's not with us. Probably work.
I want to thank everyone for coming to this panel. It's been so wonderful to have you all here. We've had people throughout our hour. We had people come and go. I think someone mentioned that they had a teacher crisis at school. They had to miss the middle, but they're going to be coming back again. I think that was one Trek fan who said that. So we're so happy to see our some of our regulars, our lifers, as we like to call each other, and then also so many new faces. Larry, again, if people want to watch live on Saturdays, weekly, they can go here, facebook.com/group/life support live. Where else can people connect to get more Life Support Live?
Right, that's our actual Facebook group. The actual shows are on my Facebook, which is Larry Nemecek's Trekland, my Trek Facebook, and also my YouTube channel, which is Larry Nemecek, which is what we're on right now, I think, or is it on yours? Yeah,
we're on YouTube, Larry Nemecek. Yep.
Yeah, this YouTube channel is where we are at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern, 6 British, 7 Central Europe on Saturdays, live every week. We haven't missed a week yet, which is amazing. We came close a couple of times, but we've had something every week. And but our Facebook page is where sometimes we throw out a poll, we take a sampling, we have some fun, we have caption this photos, and we have the community building. So please like and share my channel here. Please share around the page on Facebook and be part of the community. We'd love to have you.
Yeah,
we're not quite as manic on Saturday. Well, we can be. But and not to abuse a term, but we're a little more depressed today.
Yeah, folks. And in the meantime, if you'd like to get more from me, I'm at Mattu on social media. My YouTube channel is The Psych Show on YouTube. Larry, where can people find you? You on social media?
Yes, at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, and also Larry Nemecek's Trekland is Facebook and my Instagram, so I invite you to come over there too. But please subscribe on my YouTube channel. Thanks, guys. I got into it late, so.
As thanks. Folks, we like to say, live long and prosper.
Oh yeah, Trek well, guys. Once again.